Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Should we start now?
Yeah, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Okay, welcome all the participants. We start this session on interconnectivity of teaching and research. Uh, this topic is not new in a sense that you are all in teaching, supposedly with the permanent appointment. So you will be here in this profession for next 35 to 40 years. You have already done some research work before your appointment,
Yes,
either
sir.
for your PhD or post-doctoral experience. Some of you might be even guiding research, might have been guiding research for a few years. So you already know that relationship between teaching and research is very, very strong, and the requirement, even in the teaching job, has great expectations of research activities by all the teachers. So this relationship, uh, how is this relationship? It is productive or non-productive? It is good or it is inconsequential? These are the things which we will address in this presentation. My presentation will be really in two parts. First part, I will give you some historical introduction because most of you get into research without knowing about the relationship between teaching and research. Most of you who go to research, not you, but all the people who do research, I think majority of them go into teaching, and of course, some of them also go into the pure research, who join the labs of Department of Science Technology, Department of Biotechnology, or CSIR labs, or Atomic Energy, or ISRO. So some of them also go to the pure research jobs. But since the research jobs are not that many, majority of those people who do research go to universities and colleges because there is so much of demand. There are so many colleges, there are so many universities, private as well as government sector, deemed university, various types of universities are there. So most of the people who go into research after their post-graduation go to the teaching profession. Obviously, some of them are very actively engaged in research throughout their career. Some of them start with the research to some extent, and depending upon their other responsibility, whether they are teaching in an undergraduate college or teaching in a postgraduate college or teaching in a university, continue their research for some time, and then as the opportunities become less and less, their research activities go down. So the relationship between teaching and research is very, very uh, intense, and excuse me, and it is becoming more intense every day. You might have heard recently that in the National Education Policy 2020, there is a lot of motivation for research. A lot of incentives are given, um, and from this year, the Anusandhan National Research Foundation (ANRF) has been started. Of course, it was envisaged in the new education, in the National Education Policy of 2020, and in the last budget itself, 50,000 crores were promised by the Finance Minister, Madam Sitaraman. but they were not released. But now I hear that those money has been released. Released in a sense that 70% of that money has to come from industry, and the government spends only 30% of that. So 30% of that 50,000 for divided by 5 for 1 year has been already, I hear, that released 2 weeks back for reimbursement. Of course, release means the commitment is there. There is a particular procedure that you go through uh, for getting that money. Its money is not given to the university or to the colleges directly, but it is given to the particular researcher through the university and colleges. So it's a proper procedure. If you have been guiding research, if you have certain projects, you're already familiar with those procedures. I don't have to go through that. It is a lengthy procedure. It takes more than a year from the date you write your proposal and by the date you get the money, if it is funded. In fact, it takes more than a year. It is promised by the government that in the national education policy, this time will be reduced, and maybe within 6 to 1 year you will be funded. So that is the situation in our country. In our country, the research has become almost integral part of the teaching profession. Right from the university to colleges, especially postgraduate colleges, and is expected also in the undergraduate colleges that some project works will be given, because if you are following the national education policy curriculum and the standards for BSc and BSc honors, there is a project work in BSc honors also. There is a BSc honors with the research work. So obviously the research has percolated down from the PhD to PG to UG level. And I'm sure the many postgraduate colleges or even the undergraduate colleges, which are rich in resources, whether be it academic or infrastructural or financial, will be starting research projects, research work even in the undergraduate level. So the research is now percolating right from the undergraduate third year or fourth year. Now it is 4-year undergraduate program. Probably it is implemented in your college or not, but in sooner or later, in a couple of years, it will be implemented in each and every college, which are affiliated to certain universities. So in this 4-year college, at the end of third year, you will get into the research. If you are interested and you are capable in the estimates of your teachers and faculty, that you have an aptitude and the ability to do research, you can do BSc or BA also by research. So the importance of research has gone up many times in the last few years, even so, more so with the implementation of the national education policy. So in all this research work is until now done in addition to your teaching duties. You don't get any extra money for research. You don't get any extra time. By that I mean that you don't get relaxation in your teaching duties because you are doing research. So you have to do the research work over and above your teaching responsibilities or other responsibilities you may have in your college or institutions. Like if you might be lab in charge, you might be proctor, you might be warden, or whatever some other responsibility you are given in addition to your teaching duty. Research is over and above all that. So therefore, going into research as a teacher involves a lot of commitment and a lot of effort at the cost of your personal life, your family life, and your other aspects of your interests. Moreover, it is a full-time occupation. Full-time, by that I mean really a 24 hours, 7 days a week type of assignment. While your teaching duty is whatever teaching you are assigned in a week or in a day, you do it in the college. But research is a thinking process, so it doesn't stop even when you are not in a college or in a lab, because your mind is always working. So if you are active in research, you are always doing something, or you are always thinking of something if you are not doing in the laboratory. you are always involved in the research work. So what I'm trying to say, it is a very, very tough and involved activity in comparison to the teaching. Doing teaching and research at the same time is a quite demanding profession. But unfortunately, if you are in teaching profession, you have to do this. Otherwise, your career graph doesn't move fast or doesn't move at all. So this is the situation at present. As I said, I will give this presentation in two parts. In the first part, I will give you some historical introduction because no subject is easily or is completely comprehensible unless you go into the history of it. So the history is something which is very revealing. It is also inspiring and is also motivating. So it is better that you understand what is the history of the connection between teaching and research, how it is started, and what is the situation at present. So that my presentation will be, first part will be dealing with this aspect of teaching and research. And the second part of my presentation will deal with the present situation of teaching and research and its interconnectivity. What has been done research-wise? How do we understand this connection? Or do we understand this connection at all? First, to ask the question whether there is an interconnection between them or not. If there is an interconnection, what is it? And how it has been arrived at? Whether it is true representation of the actual situation or not. So these are the questions which we will be asking and try to answer them. Some of them may have answers, some of them may not have answers, as we will see in my presentation. So to start with, you see, first let me go to the history of the higher education, especially with reference to India. You see, higher education or the education has been the most experimented policy in the country compared to other policies. You already know the history of higher education policies. Because you might have attended many workshops, many conferences in connection with the national education policy, because almost every university, every college, every organization has been organizing seminars and professions on the National Education Policy 2020 after it has been approved and implemented in our country. So you must have attended some. So you probably are familiar with the history of higher education, history of education, the policies, the policies in the time of the UPA government, the policies before that, policies before independence. So you must be familiar with the history of all this. But I will concentrate on really the history of the interconnectivity between teaching and research. You see, research was never, not always a part of teaching in the universities. When the universities were started in 15th and 16th century. How the universities were started, where they were started, you are also very familiar because our country has one of the very oldest universities at Takshila and Nalanda. And recently, Nalanda has been in news very much because of the inauguration of the new campus there by the Prime Minister last year. And also, the history of Nalanda has been told many times in the last 6 months, last 1 year, in very many conferences and the universities. You may have had opportunity for attending those lectures, knowing the history of Nalanda and Takshila. Takshila is unfortunately now in Pakistan. So, but Nalanda and time of Nalanda, there are many other universities, Vikramshila and others. The area of today's what we call Bihar, Orissa, and Andhra. In this belt, there were many universities which were established at the same time as Nalanda, which you probably know, were established in the Buddhist period. And they were a great center of Buddhist knowledge. Not only that, they also had teaching or instructions in other subjects, science subjects like mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, logics. But the universities were started mainly with religious studies. Whether they were there in Vedic period or in Buddhist period or even Islamic period or the British period, that those are the periods which have experimented with the higher education in our country. First, it started with the Vedic period, and then started with the Buddhist period. Then we had the Islamic period, Islamic invasion, and madrasas were established. Many Islamic centers were established, and then the East India Company came, and the British government, British Raj came. So it is in the time of the East India Company and British Raj that we connected with the Western education system. Western education system developed independently in Europe. Obviously, in Spain and Italy and Germany, mainly those were the leading countries which were at the time leaders of in higher education or in thought process. While Italy and Spain are very distinct, the Germany was not the Germany of today. The German influence was almost all over the Europe except France. So really, Italy, France, Spain, and the rest was dominated by German culture and German education. You see, in this period, the third and fourth centers of higher education were started in Arab countries. They were also very advanced. You must have heard many stories of dominance of Arab science in 11th, 12th, 14th centuries. And also the Chinese and Japanese system was developed independently. Obviously, in India, we do not know much about the Chinese and Japanese system, how they evolved. But still now they are one of the leading proponents of higher education in science and engineering and in every aspects of technology. So they also have very old tradition of doing science, mathematics, engineering, and research in these subjects. But we are not very much familiar in our country with those systems, so I'll not talk about that. But we are familiar with the Arab system because the Muslims came from Arab countries to our country and imposed their education system, so we know about them. We know about the Western system a lot because the Britishers came, East India Company came and started universities, education system. And later British Raj people came and started education system, which was borrowed from the Western system. So we are familiar with what system Arabs and Western countries had. And in those countries, also like our own country, we started with the religious studies. And religious studies are mainly concentrated on jurisprudence. Jurisprudence means how the law is enforced, law enforcement takes place in the country. So really the law and administration, those things were taught in those those um, those countries. So that was mainly the main concern. Can you please mute? Some of the participants have opened their mic.
Dr. Shinandan,
Please.
please mute your mic.
Shiven sir,
Please.
please mute mic.
Okay. So, okay, thank you. So, but there were two pioneers. One priest named Newman in England, and one scientist philosopher called Wilhelm von Humboldt in Germany, who advocated that universities should indulge not only in teaching but also in research. Of course, this was started earlier in Germany. And as I said in the beginning, that the university started imparting religious education, jurisprudence. And Newman was in England, even though he was a priest, he sort of opened up the university system to include the liberal arts, which means social sciences and humanities and teaching of languages, in addition to the religious studies of jurisprudence. This you might remember that in our own country, Gurukul system was really based on teaching religious aspects of our life and how to be a good human being, how to follow our religious systems, and really then the university started doing astronomy and philosophy and mathematics, another subject later on. So the Western countries also, the higher education developed in the same way, right from the religious studies, going to jurisprudence, and then going to liberal arts, humanities, and then going to science and engineering. So it was mainly Humboldt's idea that research should be started. And that was the reason Germany dominated the whole Europe, not only the whole Europe, but the world before the World War II in science and engineering. And they were the leaders in the Industrial Revolution. And of course, the neighboring countries like Italy or Spain or France also were influenced by that. In fact, as well as, of course, England. So you see that as the development took place in Europe, the German model and the British model, they were the ones which dominated the system. Of course, German model was or British model, both were sort of transplanted to the United States, which is the leader of the higher education in today's world, from Germany and England. So what American system is a mixture of Germany and England, where the research and teaching are an integral part of that. In our country, as I said, present model of universities were started based on the system of education which was advocated by Macaulay. Macaulay, probably you might have heard very frequently these days in the context of national education policy, that we have to get rid of the Macaulay system of education and get it more Indian system. But even today, mostly the Macaulay system of education is followed, in which teaching and research are done together in the universities. So on the basis of universities in England, East India Company started universities in 1857, around that. And you know that in 1857, after the first War of Independence, as we call it, or the 1857 mutiny, the East India Company got a shock and really got very scared. And as you remember, it was after that that the administration of India was taken up by the British Raj from the East India Company. Because they were very scared because of that, because they thought they probably might have to leave. And recently I found out that even the tax system was started after 1857, because they suffered so much loss that they wanted to get money from the public, or really to punish the public, and they started this tax system. So tax system also started after that. That is just, by the way, a comment. But the universities were started by the East India Company in 1857. First universities, probably you know, will started at Calcutta, Chennai, and Bombay. But these universities were not started like the universities in England. They were not started like to be Oxford or Cambridge, because their aim was not seeking knowledge. Their aim was not create knowledge. Their aim was not educate people, which is the aim of higher education, which is the aim of higher university, for which they were started in Europe and England. Their aim was to sustain the East India Company's rule, or the British Raj later on. So they wanted to create a type of people with their help, they can rule the India country, India. So their aim was not to create knowledge, or their aim of establishing the universities was not to create knowledge, but to create a group of people, what we now call babus, to create babus with their help, they can rule India. To create a class between the British people and the Indian people, who will basically be Indian, but they will be thinking like British as rulers. So that the class was created by East India Company and was sustained by the British Raj. So that is why there was no emphasis on creation of knowledge or even imparting knowledge. This creation was just to give basic instructions so that they can understand the rules and regulations of the East India Company, rules and regulations of the British Raj, and the basic knowledge of expressing themselves, communication, so on and so forth. So that was the aim. That's why you see that those days there were very few College of Science and Engineering open in India. Most of them were humanities and social sciences based creation of just graduates and the law. So there's no question of research. But that does not mean that there was no research being done here, because in addition to these government institutions opened by either Muslim rulers, Mughals before that, or the East India Company or the British Raj, there were institutions which were opened by private institutions, whether they were Muslims or private institutions. I don't mean private organizations, which were the organizations of Hindus or Muslims or other communities, Parsis and Christians community, which were not part of the government. So they were independent institutions which started higher education institutions where the research was being done. Even these institutions, government institutions, no research was done. By that I mean, don't mean that research was completely absent. It means there was no incentives from the government, no incentives from the institution to do research, but there were people who were doing research on their own, because human mind is very inquisitive. Human mind always is thinking something or the other, so it's always creating. So creative minds and competent minds in these universities always were doing something uh, or the other, which could be called research in humanities and social sciences as well as in sciences also. But with very few incentives given by the government of that time. India government, which was ruled by British. So some component of research always existed, but it did not exist as a policy like today. So that was the situation before independence. And obviously, as the pressure mounted, a great change happened after World War II, especially in India. And that was a special reason. The special reason was that British had suffered a lot in the World War II, economically, financially, and otherwise. They have also realized the German dominance, even though Germany was defeated. And they realized that this dominance was because of science and technology and development in science and engineering and research activities. So they encouraged research not only in England, but also in India. And just after the World War II, a lot of incentives were given to these universities. A lot of incentives were given by the British Raj or British Parliament to to India and Indian universities, and a lot of incentives were taken. Many engineering colleges were opened. Many committees were formed to see how research could be encouraged in the universities and other places. So, of course, they did not realize that within a couple of years of the World War II, they will have to leave India, and India has become independent. So with all this, they had already started, but in 1947 they had to leave just 2 years after the end of the World War. So Indian government has to formulate its own policy. Of course, India government of that time realized the importance of higher education and research, and they did great things. But obviously, India being a very huge country with great population, there are not enough resources to do everything which government planned, and the priorities were different. What were the priorities in India? In India, after independence, many colleges, many universities, many institutions were opened. But what was the priority? Priority was not the research, was also not the teaching. It doesn't mean that it was neglected, but that was not the priority. Priority was making the whole country literate. Literacy rate was very down. The huge population of our country was deprived of education, deprived of basic primary education. As I said, literacy rate was very high. So their aim, just after independence, was to educate everybody in our country, to educate all the people, especially those coming from the underprivileged class, underdeveloped areas, and underdeveloped communities. So emphasis was put more on primary and secondary education, but less on the higher education and research. So the aim was equity and inclusivity, to bring everybody in the net of education, primary education or higher education, whatever you can call. But first to educate people, first to make everybody literate. So even though a large number of universities and colleges are opened in the government sector, but the emphasis was not research and teaching, but research was encouraged. So, and research was mainly confined to the government institutions which were very rich, funded by the central government, some funded by the state government. So as a policy, research became a part of the teaching, but it was not made mandatory. That is why you will see many people, many great teachers in our country who were in the universities in the early 50s and 60s. They were not very active in research. They were great teachers. They wrote very good textbooks, which we all studied. Of course, now you don't hear about them because now new books have come, new technologies have come. And I think in your generation, nobody is reading books anyway. You are getting always on the internet and getting in the technological aspects. You're studying online, reading online, writing online, everything is online. But in those days, it was not like that. So many people who were appointed who had not research degrees, who were not PhDs or DSc or something like that. So teaching research was encouraged, but it was not made mandatory. So the relationship between teaching and research was not that very strong. Of course, the people who were active in research were also teaching, but the people who were active in research were very minority. There were very few people in the universities. And mostly they were in science and engineering. Humanities and social sciences, there were very few people who were doing research and even those were mainly in the universities, central universities at that time, or in the good state universities like Calcutta University or Bombay University or Madras University or Lucknow University or Allahabad University or Patna University. These state universities had very good people who were doing research, but they were in minority. Not because research was not mandatory. So anybody who was good in teaching could aspire to become a professor, become a teacher, and he was hired on the basis of that. So the relationship was not very strong. But the importance of research was not lost on the government after independence, and they did great things exclusively for research. they opened a lot of research institutions under the CSIR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, or under Department of Atomic Energy, or under many engineering colleges, or under defense research, agricultural research, ICAR, or even the Indian Medical Council, medical research. So they opened the universities with the main aim of teaching. They opened colleges with the main aim of making people taking education to every sections of the society, and then research institutions where you can do research. So even though research was done some research was done in the university, you see there were three columns. One where colleges were open for making people literate. Colleges and schools were open to make people literate. Then there were universities for teaching purposes, and then there were solely research institutions. So all three streams were there, with little overlap between teaching and research in the university, while there was no teaching at all in the research institutions maintained by the government, like CSIR labs or Department of Atomic Energy labs or ICR labs institutions. There were no teaching at all. So teaching was mainly done in the universities, and research was mainly done in the research institutions. Of course, this policy led to the decline of universities and more or less decoupling of teaching and research. The relationship nosedived. What I mean by that is, what happened? See, the research institutions had no teaching, people in the research institutions had no teaching responsibilities. So they could devote all their time, 7 days a week or 6 days a week in the institutions on the research. Moreover, these research institutions were richer in resources, infrastructure or financial, good labs, good equipment. So the people who are actively involved in research in the universities moved away from the universities to these institutions because they had better opportunities to do research. Of course, equivalent salary, but better facilities, more time. So as a result, whatever research was being done in universities, that also went away. So there are very people left in the university for personal reasons. They didn't want to leave the place for family reasons or for personal reasons. Or the people who had some special attachment with their universities did not go. But most people moved out of some university to the research institutions. So what happened? What happened? Research institutions had all the resources, rather most of the resources, but they had no students. So they had no teaching. It was completely research. Universities had a lot of students, a lot of teachers, but they had no resources. So as a result, they were doing only teaching and there was no research. So the relationship between teaching and research went down further. Of course, this was realized very soon by the government. And then the government in 60s, 70s, when the education policy was revised by Radhakrishnan Commission, or later Kothari Commission, really. Kothari Commission was very particular on promotion of research in the colleges and the university, and many schemes were started. So research again in the universities and colleges picked up as a result of Kothari Commission report. That was implemented around 65, 66. The report had come in 1964, if I remember correctly. So that was a time when the research really picked up in the universities, and but the money was limited. Money available from the government was limited. The research supported by the industry was not much. There were not many great universities who were uh, supporting research because those industries were uh, started by individuals and individual families. They were more interested in making money and selling their products rather than investing in research. Even the policies were not very conducive to start new research projects. So whatever research was being done by the support of the government. But since we had large number of universities, we had large number of students, uh, whatever money was available was very thinly distributed among the universities and colleges. Very few people who had were very good in research or very good contacts could get the research projects, could get the money. And it was very difficult to get big money for the research. But then the research and teaching rather started in the universities. In but good amount of research was done in the universities. But again, majority of people were deprived of because most of our students are probably in the colleges and postgraduate colleges which are spread all over the country. Even the very small places we have undergraduate and postgraduate colleges, and the research was not being done there, only in the state university. Now situation is completely different. In today's world, we have a lot of private universities, a lot of deemed to be universities, and then a lot of state universities, as well as more central universities. We have more IITs, more IIMs, and more AIMS. Also, as I said about the National Research Foundation, we have more money. So this has a relationship between teaching and research has strengthened today a lot more. But it was not so in just after independence. First, because of the policy. So the policy was to be inclusive, to provide literacy to everybody, to provide opportunities to every section of the society for being educated. So as a policy matter, there was not much research, so there was no question of relationship between teaching and research. In fact, I can tell you, I joined this university in Aligarh Muslim University in 1974. And then at that time, there were a lot of students coming from the Northeast and coming from other states in our university. Many students were there. But today, we have very few because a lot of institutions have opened in the Northeast, in Assam or in Meghalaya or in Manipur, in Tripura. So those students study there now, they don't come. So it has been expansion of higher education and expansion of research. I can tell you that one of the universities, like University of Tezpur, is one of the leading institutions in research in our country. So you see how our Northeastern Hill University in Shillong is one of the great centers of research. So now that even the research has proliferated to all parts of the country, and it's not constrained only in few central universities. But again, as I said, because of the vastness of our country, we still don't have enough money, enough financial resources to support research. And moreover, the research has become more expensive now. So that's the history of our teaching and research in our own country. Now let me come to the relationship between teaching and research. After going through this brief history of teaching and research in our own country and how it has been influenced by the British Raj, by the Macaulay system of education. Of course, let me add also that now few developments which are taking place is opening instruction in local languages, writing textbooks in local languages, obviously doing research in local languages. So obviously that way research will be accessible to many more people. In fact, we as a student, when we were moved from school and college to the universities in 1960s, 61, 62, then we had great difficulty in adapting to the English medium because came from the Hindi medium and the university teaching was being done in English medium. So now we had lot of time in a problem in adopting to the English medium. But now it is different. Now with your own mother tongue, you can go up to PhD level, and obviously doing everything in the mother tongue is more useful and more productive. As you can see by people like in China and Japan or France or Germany, they all do research and teaching in their own language, and that is one of the reasons they are very productive. So maybe after national education policy, when the medium of instruction shifts to completely to the local languages, then maybe we will have more scientists, engineers produced by various states, whether be it Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or UP or West Bengal, because they will be more um, fluent in learning in their own language rather than in a foreign language like English. So with the policy change in the national education policy, maybe in the next 20 years we will be more productive and we will be more creative in respective areas of instruction. So now let me come back to the relationship between teaching and research. The question is, what type of interconnectivity between teaching and research we are asking? Obviously, most of the teachers like you, especially of this generation, are already doing research at some level. Maybe they are doing their own research, or maybe they are guiding research. Maybe they are doing both. Maybe they are doing at some level. Maybe you are recognized, your work is good enough, recognized at national level or even international level. So at various level of excellence, people are working in the universities and colleges and doing research. So, so research and teaching are coexisting in the universities. Recently, the institutions of pure research, like Department of Atomic Energy, had already started a university called Homi Bhabha National Institute University, where their employees, which are scientists, basically can do research, can do teaching. Similarly, the CSIR labs, they have also started doing teaching, of course, at PhD level or MPhil level, not at BSc, MSc level, where they can give their own degrees. So some sort of teaching has started in purely research institutions. And research has been expanded in the universities. As I said, the establishment of National Research Foundation with commitment of 50,000 crore rupees for the next 5 years. So it is going to be boosted up in the coming years. But we are talking about interconnectivity, a relationship between teaching and research. Does research make good teachers? I mean, for that you have to compare those teachers who are doing research and who are not doing research. So does the research make teachers better, or the vice versa? Does the teaching helps you in conducting research or doing good research work? Does teaching help? So that is a question. But before that, more fundamental question is, why should there be a relationship between teaching and research? I feel very strongly that they should be connected, and there should be a positive connection, which means teachers who are doing research should be good teachers. But that's my feeling. Not really feeling, but my own personal experience, because I have been in teaching and research for more than 50 years. Now, I know many people like me who have been very actively involved in teaching as well as in research. And they are very good teachers, they are very good researchers. But it is not true for everybody. There are some exceptions. But here we are asking a general question. General question is, does the research improve your teaching, or the teaching improves your research? Which means, is the correlation between teaching and research positive? First, is there a correlation? It is non-zero. Zero means there is no relationship. Is positive relationship connectivity is positive or negative? So we have to quantify this relationship. And how do we quantify this relationship? We can do this by doing research. Then we have to do some research, and then we have to bring some mathematics and statistics to quantify the research. So we have to define what we call correlation between teaching and research. People who do statistics or people who do mathematics, you know, if there are two variables, X and Y, and you want to find out the relations between X and Y, then there are certain mathematical formulas, there are certain statistical formulas, certain correlation formulas, which you have to study based on the sample survey. So you have to do a sample survey to conduct research, conduct your so-called experiment or survey to answer this question. So this question of interconnectivity between teaching and research cannot be answered based on the feeling, like people like me or people like you. What you feel will not be the answer. Answer has to be based on sound, scientific reasoning, scientific data. In questions like that, and in many subjects like that, like in medicine and other fields, the research is done only by surveys, by sample surveys, sample size. The question then comes out with sample size. Is the sample size effective or not? And then you study the various types of correlations between these two variables. That is, one is teaching and one research. It's a difficult subject to do teaching and research, the relationship between teaching and research, to do sample survey. But it has been done. To my knowledge, much work has been done in our country, but in countries like United States or United Kingdom or Australia or some European countries like Denmark and Sweden, the research has been done very scientifically to answer the question, what is the relationship between teaching and research? It is positive or it is negative or it is null, no relationship. But it's a difficult topic to do research. Why it is difficult topic to do research? First, well, before I answer this question, let me ask you why I feel, and probably some of you also feel, that research activity should make you a better teacher. Why I feel so is that teaching is an intellectual activity. Research is also an intellectual activity. And both are intellectual activity of higher level. Of course, the research is a little higher level intellectual activity as compared to teaching. Why? Because teaching is imparting the knowledge which you have learned to others. You might have got degree without learning or with learning. Hopefully with learning your subject. But there are very many people who can do or who have got degree without much learning. Anyway, if you have got degree, you have a teaching job, you are supposed to teach. You are supposed to impart the knowledge which is already existing there in the books or in your mind or in your brain. Whatever knowledge you have acquired, you are supposed to impart this to others. Obviously, you can acquire some knowledge while imparting this knowledge to others, which means you can do research work, you can do PhD while or you can acquire knowledge while teaching. So, first thing, you should be good learner. You should have learned your things very well. And then you should be good communicator. These are the two conditions for you to be a good teacher. Good knowledge and good communicator. In the research, you need something more. You should have good knowledge of the subject to build upon. Then you should have ability to create knowledge. That is what we call research. So there's one activity, intellectual activity, higher than the teaching. You should be able to create knowledge. And of course, then you should be able to communicate whatever you have created to others. So a researcher has to do three things. He has to learn, he has to create, and he has to communicate. While a teacher has to learn and to communicate. So, as I said, the teaching and research both are intellectual activity of higher order. Research is little more higher. It has one more component. So, both are functions of your brain, of your mind. Same cells, or same type of cells control both activities. So obviously they should be related. So that's why I feel very strongly that there should be a relationship between teaching and research, because both are intellectual activity conducted by your brain, your mind, and therefore they should be related. That is the first criteria. Obviously, there are various ways to use research in your teaching. I will not go into detail because of time constraint. But you see, to get as I said, quantitative result, to give a number on this relationship, you have to do sample survey. And for sample survey, we have to design some questions which should be answered. But before that, design the questions, we have to define certain parameters which define a good teacher. And then we have to define certain parameters which define a good researcher. Okay. Then based on these criteria, based on these parameters, we have to ask questions and we have to do survey from the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are primary stakeholders of the students. So you have to conduct a survey among the students. Then stakeholders are your employers. So you have to take the survey to your principals or vice chancellors and people like that, or your head of departments, maybe even your colleagues, to rate a teacher on those various parameters. Hello? I'm in a meeting. I'll call you later. Hello? Hello? मैं मीटिंग में हूँ, बाद में बात करूंगा जरा. ठीक. Okay. So then you have to similarly devise certain parameters for the for research, for good research, and then you have to frame questions on those parameters and ask for response to the stakeholders, as I said, students or employers. Or a third type of stakeholders are the people who give you money for research, for example, your funding agencies. They might even grade you on those questions. But the primary difficulty is finding the criteria. Now, what defines a good teacher? Whatever the criteria you find, I can show that it is not foolproof. For example, what defines a good teacher? Does the result of your class define a good teacher? Does the discipline of a class define good teacher? Or what are the parameters? Similarly, what defines a good researcher? Is the number of research papers is a good research? Or quality of a paper is a sign of good research? If that is so, who defines the quality? Who decides the quality? Who grades them? Your paper has A plus, A or B minus. So this is more subjective than objective. Again, the number of papers. You might have 100 papers, but somebody may have 200 papers in journals which are not well known. Some people may have only 10 papers, but internationally very famous journals. It's often quoted that Einstein has very few papers, but he's of course one of the most brilliant scientists of our century. So number of papers is also controversial. The quality of paper is also controversial. Who decides it? Recently, UGC has a committee who made a list of the journals where good journals are listed. Good journals, if you publish in those journals, you will be recognized by the UGC, otherwise not. Even that list had been revised so many times. Still, people feel there are a lot of second-rate, third-rate journals included in that, and they are not good. So that is also a subjective decision. So it's very difficult to design a criterion or parameters for being a good teacher, or parameters of being a good researcher, and then to compare them is more difficult. So that is the problem in doing research in this area of connectivity between teaching and research. But it doesn't mean that research cannot be done. You can always start somewhere and do some research. This research has been done in the United States as well as in the UK. And I will tell you some results. Of course, you can guess the results of these researches. In the United States, there was a Bayer Commission. In UK, there was a Dinning report. Both were done around 1999, and they have been followed up. In Canada, each university, good universities have their own survey done. In some universities and IITs in India also, they have their own way to grade teachers and researchers. But there is no general way to study this relationship. Because as you know, in education, there are very well-known questionnaires which are used to do various cognitive tests, and like that, there is no tests which have been designed to test the interconnectivity of teaching and research, mainly because of the difficulty I already pointed out. Nevertheless, these commissions have worked on this issue. They have their own reports. For example, I can quote you from the American report. American Commission was established with two functions in mind, because you see, America, most of the research is funded by industry, some by different government institutions, but mainly by industries. Also in Europe, it is like that. So, I mean, the feeling was that good researchers make good teachers. Then, by supporting research in a big way, they will improve the universities. They will have good teachers. So, why not do research on this subject? And if it is found that there is a connectivity relationship between teaching and research is positive, then they should enhance their research funding. And that way, they will have not only good research,
Sir,
but
एक
also
second.
improve teaching in the universities and colleges. So that was the aim for which the commission was established. And of course, they had many recommendations. I think 37 recommendations of their report. And they again appointed another committee to see whether those recommendations have been followed by the universities and colleges or not. But that is a different issue. Let me come back to this results of this survey, because I have now 15 minutes left. So, what is the result? The result, you see, as I said, the research has been done in the United States, United Kingdom, also in Denmark and Sweden. And all three types of results have come. Some have found that the interconnectivity or the relationship between teaching and research is positive, but small but positive. Some have found it is large but positive. Some have found that there is no relationship. And some have found that there is negative relationship. And we can understand this. We can understand positive relationship. I have already explained to you why there should be a positive relationship. There are many other reasons. I will not go into detail. But there could be negative reasons, negative results also. Because if somebody is very active in research, then he has more grants. If he has more grants, then he gets awards. Then if he gets awards, then he is invited to more meetings. As a result, his teaching is neglected. And then students suffer. So obviously in a survey, if teacher is not taking all his classes because of his research, because of his meetings, because of his project work, so on and so forth, he is busy giving lectures on his research in many other universities. With all these activities, this sort of gets increased manifold if somebody gets a reward. So better researcher you are, you have less time for teaching. So obviously, then the students will not rate you high in teaching. So the relationship between research and teaching becomes negative, because then good researchers uh, don't devote time, not because their quality has improved, quality has deteriorated, but just because they don't have time. So they don't spend time on teaching, and moreover, they found that teaching is not much that rewarding. Research is more rewarding, so they are spending more time. So that way, it could be negative also. So that depends upon many things. So what are the results? Some of the results I will tell you. For example, if you consider the postgraduate students in science and engineering, then the teacher teaching in a postgraduate class where the number of students are 20 to 25, he spends more time in interacting with the students. Probably if you are teaching in MTech or higher specialized course in MSc, you tell them about your research activities also. Probably you teach the subject in which you are specializing, or teach the subject in which you are doing research. So that way your interaction is more, and the relationship will come out to be positive and probably large. But if you are doing the same survey in a undergraduate class, and a class of, let us say, history or Hindi or Urdu, there the number of students in the undergraduate class could be 50 or 60 or even more, and that the teacher gives a lecture and leaves. There is not much interaction between the teacher and the students. In fact, the student does not even know whether his teacher does any research or not. Or if he does any research, what research he does, or what is use of that research, how useful is that research. The students just don't have any knowledge about that. So if a survey is done, the students will not rate him high because they just don't have knowledge. So obviously, if you do a survey or a research on teaching and research with undergraduate students in a humanities or art side subject, then probably you will get a zero research result. Probably you will not get any connection between teaching and research. They don't see any connection because there is no interaction. So you see, the answer depends upon whether you are doing research on undergraduate students or the postgraduate students. So you can get both answers. You can get the answers no, or you can get answers yes, positive, zero or positive, small or large, depending on the subject. So what this example tells us, that the answer depends first on the class, whether you're talking about undergraduate class, you're talking about postgraduate class, or you're talking about the PhD students. So the relationship between teaching and research cannot be defined in general. You have to specify at what level you are asking. What is the relation between teaching and research at the undergraduate level? What is the relationship between teaching and research at the postgraduate level or any other level? So that is, it depends upon the class. Number two, it depends upon the discipline, because the interaction between science and engineering or medicine, for example, is maximum. In medicine, the interaction between students and the teacher is maximum, because they spend so much time on OPD, they are together, also in the wards, and less on teaching, classroom teaching. But while arts and social sciences, the interaction is minimal. So the interaction depends upon the discipline. So you cannot answer the question in general. The question has to be answered by specifying which discipline you are asking. You are asking about arts, social sciences, or in science, engineering, or medicine. So you have to specify that. Most important, that this relationship depends also upon the type of institutions. By that, what I mean, in some institutions like central universities, central government institutions, they have more freedom to do research. You are constrained, but you are less constrained. But if you are working in a private institutions, then obviously there are more constraints. I mean, private institutions, to my knowledge, insist that you do your teaching duties very regularly, no absenteeism. They probably don't support also for your, they don't give money for you to attend conferences. They don't give also leave. They are very conservative in giving leave and giving money. Things are changing now, but that is what it used to be. So with those constraints, your research really suffers. So you cannot define a meaningful relationship between teaching and research, because you are not free to do research as you wish. But if you're a central university, they're more generous in giving you grant to attend conferences, to present papers, also to buy instruments, to give you facilities. So obviously there you are more free to do research. You have more free time probably to do research there. Teaching load is as per UGC, but that is not so in private institutions. Obviously the state universities and deemed universities are somewhere in between. So you see, it also depends upon the type of institution you are working. Another reason in this is that even in these institutions, it depends upon how are your administrators. Like even in a central university, the vice chancellor or the university administration may be very strict, maybe have different thinking. Their thinking also influences, even all the rules, regulations there. They may not be very generous in giving you leave or giving you money for doing conference attending and so on and so forth. They insist that you do first complete your teaching, probably do some extra teaching if courses are not completed, things like that. So there the relationship between research and teaching will be different. So there are so many parameters. So the general answer to the question of what is the relationship between the teaching and research cannot be answered unless you specify the discipline or the class or the type of institution or the type of administration. So there are so many things, sub parameters which have to be defined before this question can be answered in general. So that is the situation regarding the relationship, quantifications of relationship between teaching and research. So it is very difficult to quantify it in terms of statistical representation, whether the relationship is correlation between teaching and research is positive or negative or null, if it is large or small. It cannot be answered unless these questions are asked. So, but nobody says that don't ask these questions. So please ask these questions. You do your own little survey while where you are employed. You can find your own in your own way the answer to the question: what is the relationship between teaching and research? You may have your own feeling, your own thinking. What is the relationship between teaching and research? And the problems associated with it. As I said, I strongly feel personally that a good researcher makes a good teacher, and it should be so. Generally true, but it's not necessarily so because it depends upon so many external conditions. So with these comments, I would like to close the presentation and ask some of you to ask questions regarding.
सर नमस्ते सर.
Just a moment here.
जी मैं आराधना.
Okay, I think I would like to close because on this presentation by saying that as I said, there is not much research which has been done in our own country, and I think the education departments in various universities should take up this question because I strongly feel that the relationship between research and teaching is positive. Correlation coefficient is large. If it turns out to be so, then it will initiate a thinking at the government level that government support of research should be increased in the universities and colleges. Because as I said, as Americans thought that by increasing the research grant to teachers in the university and colleges, they will achieve two purposes. They will achieve good research, a large amount of research. At the same time, they will have good teachers. So with the same money, the teaching will be improved without spending extra money. Your research money will also give you good teachers. So if such research is done in established education departments of our universities, whether central university or state universities, if there are any participants from the education department, they should note this and convey to their own departments that this research should be done. And as expected, if the results comes out as expected, then it will lead to great enhancement in research grants to the teachers in the universities and colleges. And I hope so. And with this comment, I would like to close. Thank you very much. Now I will invite questions from the participants if you have any. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So if there are no questions, I think I will close.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
जी, नमस्ते सर, मैं आराधना, हिंदी विभाग मुन्नालाल कॉलेज सहारनपुर से।
या कुछ
जी,
पूछना?
मुझे हिंदी में सर जानना है, थोड़ा सा हिंदी में आप समराइज कर दीजिए। रिसर्चर और गाइड के बीच का जो रिलेशनशिप होता है, उन्हें कैसे शुरू में ही बहुत समस्याएं आती हैं, उन्हें कैसे समझाया जाए कि जिससे वो बेस्ट रिसर्च अपना मतलब उनकी जो बेस्ट थीसिस निकल के आए, और उन्हें कैसे शोध पत्र लिखना सिखाएं और थीसिस उन्हें अच्छी तरीके से कैसे लिखना सिखाएं। सर थोड़ा हिंदी में इसे एक्सप्लेन कर दीजिए प्लीज सर।
देखिए, ऐसा है कि जिन लोगों ने पीएचडी की है, रिसर्च में है, उनको तो आप रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी का पेपर पढ़ना बहुत ज़रूरी हो गया है ना। जो आप रिसर्च सबमिट करने से पहले या रिसर्च में आने से पहले जो 2 पेपर्स पढ़ने पड़ते हैं, क्लियर करना पड़ता है, उसमें तो अब मैंडेटरी हो गया है कि वो रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी पे कोई न कोई कोर्स अटेंड करें। और रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी के कोर्सेज ऐसे हैं जिसमें ये सब चीज़ें आपको सिखाया जाता है। और अगर कोर्स बिना कोर्स किए हुए तो एडमिशन ही नहीं होता पीएचडी में। तो आई ये तो इट इज बिकम मैंडेटरी कि हर कोर्स हर यूनिवर्सिटी में वो जो कोर्सेज चलाए जाते हैं, उसमें एक कोर्स तो रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी का है ही। अब अगर नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में देखें तो अब तो ये कोर्स जो है बीएससी ऑनर्स लेवल पे भी इंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया गया है, और पीजी में भी तो है ही। एक रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी का 4 क्रेडिट का कोर्स बीएससी ऑनर्स में भी है। हम लोगों ने भी बनाया है अलीगढ़ यूनिवर्सिटी के बीएससी ऑनर्स सिलेबस में, दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी के सिलेबस में भी है, इलाहाबाद यूनिवर्सिटी के सिलेबस में है। आई एम श्योर कि बाकी जितने यूनिवर्सिटीज जो है नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी जो इम्प्लीमेंट कर रहे हैं, उसमें बीएससी से ये कोर्सेज शुरू हो जाते हैं रिसर्च मेथोडोलॉजी के एट डिफरेंट लेवल्स। तो उसमें ये सिखाया जाता है कि आपको बिब्लियोग्राफी कैसे तैयार करनी है, रेफरेंसेस कैसे करने हैं, आपको रिसर्च पेपर कैसे लिखने हैं, आपको रिसर्च पेपर किस जर्नल में छापने हैं, किस जर्नल की स्टैंडिंग कैसी है। अब तो ढेर सारे रेटिंग्स आ गई हैं जो रेट करते हैं आपके सब्जेक्ट में कि कौन सा जर्नल अच्छा है, कौन सा जर्नल खराब है, कौन सबकी रेटिंग है, क्वांटिफाइड रेटिंग है ऑन सम स्केल। तो ये सब चीज़ें तो पहले आज से 10 साल पहले बहुत मुश्किल थी, लेकिन आजकल तो बहुत आसानी से उपलब्ध है। आप कोई भी इसमें कंसल्ट कर सकते हो।
सर क्या रिसर्च जो स्कॉलर होता है उसे स्टाफ टीचिंग स्टाफ के रूप में देखा जाता है क्या?
नहीं, ये देखा जाना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये पूरे यूरोप में यही सिस्टम है। यूरोप में से आप 4 साल या 5 साल जो भी रिसर्च करते हैं, तो उस टाइम आप टीचिंग का पार्ट होते हैं। आपको टीचिंग एक्सपीरियंस का सर्टिफिकेट भी मिलता है। आपकी परमानेंट जॉब नहीं होती है, लेकिन किसी न किसी रूप में आपको टीचिंग करना होता है। इनफैक्ट हम लोगों ने जब यूजीसी वगैरह में कमेटी में थे तो बहुत ये प्रपोज किया था कि हमारे हिंदुस्तान में भी ऐसा होना चाहिए, क्योंकि उससे टीचिंग लोड भी कम हो जाता है टीचर्स का। क्योंकि नॉर्मली रिसर्च स्कॉलर्स बहुत ज़्यादा होते हैं हर 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 डिपार्टमेंट में, हर यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में। तो उनको अगर 5-6 घंटे पर हफ्ते का भी टीचिंग लोड दिया जाए और कंपलसरी कर दिया जाए, मैंडेटरी, स्पेशली उनको जिनको भी स्कॉलरशिप मिलता है, जिनको नेट फेलोशिप या जेआरएफ मिलता है या कोई भी जेआरएफ मिलता है, उनको 5-6 घंटे अगर कंपलसरी टीचिंग ड्यूटी करना शुरू कर दें तो इससे बहुत हेल्प मिलेगी और उनकी भी टीचिंग एक्सपीरियंस। लेकिन ऐसा अभी कुछ हुआ नहीं है, पता नहीं ये लोग क्यों नहीं करते हैं।
नहीं सर, हमारे यहाँ होता है इसलिए आपसे पूछा।
नहीं, ये तो हर सबको, ये तो देखिए इसके लिए कोई पॉलिसी की भी जरूरत नहीं है। ये तो यूनिवर्सिटी जो है अपने लेवल पे खुद इम्प्लीमेंट कर लेती है, करना चाहिए। लेकिन ढेर सारी यूनिवर्सिटी जो भी रीजन हो नहीं करती।
जी, यूजीसी के नियम में भी है शायद, एक पीरियड पढ़ाना है उन्हें पर डे, तो एक पीरियड पढ़ाते हैं हमारे यहाँ।
नहीं, होना चाहिए।
जी, ओके, थैंक यू सर।
Any other question? Okay, if there are no questions, I think I will close this session. Thank you very much for being with me for last hour and a half. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for a wonderful session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
किसी ने अभी तक वीडियो लेक्चर या असाइनमेंट सबमिट किया है क्या?
आज हो जाएगा सर।
नहीं, कुछ पूछना था।
कोई नहीं, आज करेंगे फिर कल बताएंगे।
ठीक है, ठीक है।
ओके।